Welcome to the Ebony Road Players Podcast. I'm your host, Edye Evans Hyde, singer, performer, and founder of Ebony Road Players. As a Black theater company in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Ebony Road Players strives to inspire, educate, and engage the cultures of our community. In this podcast, we take a deeper dive into the topics and issues surrounding the stories that we tell. So let's jump right into some meaningful dialogue and celebrate the diverse communities that we share. So welcome everyone to the Ebony Road Players Podcast. So happy to have you here today. And we have a lovely guest for you. And I'm going to introduce you to her after I kind of give us a little feeling of what this episode is going to be about. And I thought maybe I could do that by quoting something from a great playwright named August Wilson. And the quote goes like this: I believe in the American theater. I believe in its power to inform about the human condition, its power to heal, its power to uncover the truths as we wrestle from uncertain and sometimes unyielding realities. And that was by the great playwright, August Wilson. If you don't know who August Wilson is, you need to find out, check him out. Some of you may know him through a movie that was out, I want to say a couple of years ago, with Chadwick Boseman, and the play was called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And if you saw that, then you have seen one of the great playwrights come to a movie forum. So you need to check his stuff out. So to get us going, that's how I want to set the tone for us here at the Ebony Road Players Podcast. And today my guest is my friend, Deborah Bayard. And Deborah is, you probably all know who she is. If you don't know who she is, we're going to have her introduce herself to you because you need to know who this lady is. So Deborah, welcome.
Hello, Edye. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm so happy to have you on this with us.
I am as well. I am so excited to be here and to spend some time with you talking about a subject that you and I both love so very much.
And that subject is all about the arts. So tell everyone, because I know who you are. So just tell everyone who you are. And I guess we can talk about how we know each other, but tell us a little bit about your background and what you do here. I think people would be really interested in that.
Well, I am an educator. I spent a couple of decades in Grand Rapids Public Schools as a teacher, as well as a consultant. And I also do work with Grand Valley State University, preparing future teachers to teach in the classroom. The other part of my life has been being a partner with my hubby in Bayard Gallery of Fine African American Art, which was opened for close to 30 years.
Yeah.
And then we transitioned from Bayard Gallery to GRAAMA, which is Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives. And I serve there as the Education Coordinator, but I wear many hats. And you and I know each other through Ebony Road Players. I am a former board member of Ebony Road Players and absolutely, completely support the mission of Ebony Road Players.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, we loved having you on the board. And I know you have other things to do with GRAAMA, which is great. GRAAMA's growing like amazingly. But I always feel like that our mission is kind of the same. Do you know what I mean? It's a part of the arts community that I think makes our community so vibrant. Mm-hmm. And so, taking this information or this quote from August Wilson, I think that's where we are at. I think GRAAMA is where that is. And I think that Ebony Road Players does the same thing. And I want to know, why do you think these two entities especially, and I know there's more art, there's not just, visual art, there's not just theater art, there's all kinds of art that really delves into the BIPOC community at large. But why do you think that's so important to our community?
Well, I think particularly now, but one of the things, and I just want to piggyback on what you said about August Wilson, he is known and famous because he told stories for each decade in the 20th century.
Yes.
And so progressively, each of his plays touches on a point in time in history and just takes a snapshot of life living as a person of color in America. And so as we look at the times that we're living in now and how important it is to continue those stories, to share those stories. First of all, it's important for the community and world at large to hear our stories, to know who we are, and to hear our stories about us, by us.
Right.
It is crucial that they do. The second thing that is hugely important, and as it marries into GRAAMA's mission, is just really capturing the history, because so many quotes about if you don't know where you've been, you won't know where you're going. And I could go on and on right now, just even thinking about the quotes in my head about history. But history is so important, and it is important to capture those stories for our young people. Currently now, and I know we'll probably talk about some projects that GRAAMA is working on, but currently now we are working on an oral history project about South High School, and about the closing of South High School. And I am not originally from here, but I feel like I've been here for, almost a couple of decades. I've been here for a long time. Right. And I can remember as a newbie teaching in GRPS, and I would encounter women who were my mentors, and men as well, but women who were my mentors, who, whenever the words South High School came up, there was such a reaction, and I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. But even though it had been many years at that point that South High had been closed, there still was this reaction. And that was many years ago. And so recently, headed by one of our board members, Fran Dalton, we are really gathering those alumni from South High School and really having conversations around what that felt like to have your school closed. We're also having some legal people, some people in the legal community to really address the history of that decision. And we are gathering people who maybe you don't live here now and you live somewhere else. And through the miracle of Zoom, we are able to bring in people who live elsewhere, but who have stories to tell about South High School. That's just one thing as it relates to the arts and history. And I think with Ebony Road Players doing something very similar, in that you are capturing stories and sharing them so that the community at large, the world, and especially our young people, especially our youth, understand. I think about, even, I know I'm going on, just stop me whenever.
No, I'm loving it, every minute of it.
But I think about what just took place yesterday. And I think about particularly the era of the 60s, but even pre-60s. I think about the sacrifices that were made in order for people to be able to go and cast their vote. If you even just have a fraction of understanding how people literally died in order to be able to cast a ballot. You would not take yesterday, you would not take any day that involves an election and letting your voice be heard. You would not take that for granted. And so I feel like it's up to us as arts organizations. It's up to all of us, but it has fallen on us as arts organizations, as history organizations, to capture those stories and to make sure that those stories are not forgotten. And more importantly, that those people are not forgotten, right?
Yes. That is absolutely what the different art forms have always been about telling our history, because we do tend to have there's a tendency to forget. There's a tendency to move on and people not know exactly where they came from. I have to remind people all the time that, these things that you are taking for granted right now were not always the case. And I think that for people of color, it's very important to have that history. I also think that there's a very big push to not have that history be told. And so I think we are one of the only people, we're the only groups of people who can actually still take that as an entertainment source, but also be teaching through that as well. Do you know what I mean about that?
I know exactly what you mean. And when you say that it tends to be forgotten, I think both intentionally and unintentionally that happens. I mean, I have to refer back to 2020 just because it was such a monumental year. And I can recall, and I said this at the time, as a country, we were on the same page for maybe about 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, that's everybody.
Right.
Everybody for 2 to 3 weeks. We were rolling up our sleeves. We were doing what it took to make sure that, hey, we were speaking about injustice. We were talking about health concerns in the community, just not even just in our community, in the world, right? In our country. We were talking about those things for maybe 3 weeks. And after 3 weeks passed, in fact, I wrote an opinion piece, a couple of them actually in 2020, addressing this, that after those 3 weeks, there was both intentional and unintentional efforts to really, oh yeah, we're past that. We're beyond that. That we're not going to talk about that. We're not dealing with that. And so unfortunately, much of that time was spent in the argumentative of, yes, we do need to talk about it. No, we're not going to talk about it. Instead of, let's address what the real concerns are, what the real disparities are, what's really happening. Let's spend our time addressing that. And the focus was not on that. The focus was on, you're wrong, I'm right. And it was just this back and forth. And it really, it affected me, and I'll just be fully transparent here. It affected me beyond what I realized or thought. And it wasn't, some people say, oh, I was isolated. So that wasn't it for me. It wasn't that I had to hunker down. What happened for me was I saw those 3 weeks where we were all on the same page, and I was excited, even though it was really tough. I was excited because I was thinking, oh my goodness, we're coming together. This is what we want. We want to come together as a country. I was just so excited is not the right word, but and I can't think of the word that I want to say right now, but I was relieved that we were coming together. I had people who I know think very differently than I do, who reached out to me, who wanted to have conversation, who wanted to talk about racial reconciliation, who just, wanted to have conversation. And so being the natural educator that I am, I responded to that. I gave out book lists. I talked about, hey, let's do a Zoom. And I was all in on that. And then after those 3 weeks, it began to taper off. And some of those folks, again, in full transparency, some of those folks don't even talk to me anymore. And that part really saddens me, because I think I question then, and maybe I shouldn't, because it's their whatever, their space, it's their their motivation. But I question then, how resilient are you if after 3 weeks you can't hang in there? And not only that, you don't want to hear it. And then I heard a quote that said, if you think racism is bad, try living it. Yeah. And I know that I'm not quoting that exactly right, but that was the point. If you think racism is bad, if you think it's difficult, try living it.
Yes.
And so that was for me even more of a push in terms of our organization, and in terms of GRAAMA, in terms of Ebony Road Players and other arts organizations who decided, hey, I do want the stories to be told. I'm not going to push it back and push it down. It's going to be uncomfortable. There are going to be some things that I may not like to hear, but I'm going to engage nonetheless, because I know it's for the greater good, right? And so, yeah, that sort of really my these last 2 years or 3 years, I guess, starting with 19, the end of 19, and then on into 20 and 21, and here we are in 22, almost the end of 22. That's just been my world of how do we move this forward? How do we capture these stories? How do we talk about the pain? As some would say, oh my goodness, South High, that was 50 years ago. Why are you guys talking about that? People don't understand the residual effects of trauma. They don't understand that you might want to push that aside. And in some cases we do, we bury it, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. And so we are really excited, I have to say, to embrace this project, to give people a platform to talk about, their trauma.
Well, I want to go back to what you just said about the last those 3 weeks that you were engaged and people were engaged with you. I have to say that is the exact same thing that happened to me. I ended up in a couple of book clubs. People wanted to talk about some of the books that were out, and dealing with racism and dealing with history and that type of thing. And I actually wanted to get together with some of these people, like you said, and do a Zoom call about what's next. And it never happened. It absolutely never happened. And I almost think that maybe part of that is a little bit of fear on their part, a little bit of maybe families like, why are you doing this? And maybe a little pushback. Because I think those people are still there. I mean, I don't know when this podcast will be put out, but talking about the election, we'll have to make sure that everyone knows when that was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But still, I mean, the election for Michigan was so amazing because I think those people spoke. I think those people were there. They went through a 3-week process or 4-week process, and probably could only take so much, and then came back. And the people that we have come to our plays tend to be those people as well. They want more information. They want to know. And then we have our talk backs afterwards. So what you're doing with with the high school, with South High, I mean, I've heard so many stories about South High. I'm so happy that you are doing that. There were amazing musicians, famous musicians that came from South High and went on, to go to LA or whatever. I mean, it was a multiracial school, right?
Yeah.
And then some of the things I'm sure that they had to deal with by being a multiracial school, but I'm excited about that. Very excited about that. And there was something else that you brought up too, and it was leading, I can't remember what you said, but it was leading into collaboration, like the things that we are doing right now as Ebony Road Players, as GRAAMA. We've been collaborating with people to have that power to get those stories out, because it's not just us that want to tell those stories. We just did an event with GRAAMA and the symphony. And I did have Aaron Doty on just recently. I think he was at my a couple weeks ago, I think it was. And we talked about the collaboration with community. And how that was such an amazing event that I hope that we do again, because people are trying to collaborate and trying to be a part of these stories, the storytelling opportunities. So tell me how important you think collaboration is. Now, I just told you how important I thought it was, but give me your background on why you think collaborative and support. Sometimes we don't always get the support that we need because we're small or because we are very specific in what we do. Talk about collaboration a little bit.
Well, I think first of all, it's so important because it is not on one entity to tell community stories. It's not on one group to tell, because our culture is so diverse within our culture.
Yes.
It's so diverse.
Yes.
It just is. And so gathering folks from various organizations and groups to give perspective, even on the same event. And so I'll go back to South High. Many people are having conversations, and there is a common theme and a common thread, but there are others who are speaking to, oh, I had this experience, or my experience was this. And so the same is true as you gather the organizations together and you collaborate, you gain perspective that you didn't have before. Oh, I never really looked at it like that. The other thing that happens in a community is there are more of you with a common mission telling the story. So there are more of you to get the story out to the community. So we don't operate in silos, though that has been true at times. There's a whole, I could go really into a psychological thing right now of why.
Go ahead.
Why that is. I don't want to go too deep, but from many years ago, I mean, I just really don't want to go so deep here, but from many years ago, we were such a strong community, and we were convinced to believe that in order to be successful, you had to operate exclusively or differently, or move into a different space in order to be successful. In other words, you couldn't bring your background with you. You couldn't bring what you knew to be familiar and comforting and just who you are. You were really forced in some cases, encouraged or discouraged from bringing who you really were to a space, right? And so I think now what has happened, and really, I have to say the 70s spoke to a lot of this. Again, I'm not trying to get real deep here, but the 70s really allowed us, I think, more to embrace who we are and then bring that into wherever we were going, right?
Yes.
And so as we have evolved really from the 70s until now, where you see more people with their natural hair, you see people embracing more parts of who we are and bringing those into spaces. It's just become such a empowering thing right now. It's just very empowering. And so as we gather together in collaboration, and I see my sister over there and she's succeeding, and I see my sister over here and she's succeeding, or even if she's stumbling a little bit, I can jump in there and say, hey sis, what do you need?
Yes.
What do you need? Hey brother, what do you need?
Right.
And so that's what happens in collaboration and community. We come together, and then we offer those parts, those pieces, whether it is advice, whether it is financial support, whether it is emotional support, camaraderie, whatever that is, we are able to do that in community, whereas we're not able to do that when we're isolated or in silos, right? And so I believe now this is just really a move right now to come together and to really support each other because of what we have seen over the last, particularly the last couple of years.
Yes. Your conversation about silos that's kind of our community overall. And I can see where the hardest part is breaking down those silos. And this, of course, goes back to the art forms again, that gathering people to see something that they're not used to seeing, or talking about issues that they normally don't get a chance to talk about, is, I think, one of the most positive things for our arts community in general. And as I'm saying that, we know that the organizations that we partner with, sometimes like the symphony or the GRAAMA or anything like that, they tend to know how important that is in general, and they know what they need to do to reach out to certain communities. But how do we get our own? You and I have talked about this. How do we get our own communities to come out? How do we get our people of color to support and say, hey, this is important? Because we're basically doing it for, I always feel like Ebony Road Players is, at first, we're doing it to allow Black people or people of color to express themselves through our particular art form, through acting or whatever. So we're really working on that. But how do we get them to actually, in large numbers, come see what we're doing and see how it's important for their community? Sometimes I think that's one of the hardest things for it's hard for us to do. And I'm wondering what you thought about that.
Well, and I think the collaboration helps, because if I know that Ebony Road Players, if GRAAMA knows that, there are ways that we can support you by getting the word out to people who are in our network, right? One thing that happened this last Sunday that we sort of came across at the Ford Museum, there was a Black author. She is a young adult fiction writer. And I happened to hear that she was going to be there. And so I put that out to my networks. The crowd was not as large as we would have liked, particularly because she was amazing. She was fabulous. Her work, if you want to think of a hashtag, it's representation matters. She had young Black boys as her central characters, and young Black girls. She goes into schools, and her work is phenomenal. And the book that she was promoting, although she has several, the book was called "The Swag is in the Socks." And it was amazing. Okay. But I would not have known about it had that organization, a person who was director of education at that organization, reached out to me and said, hey, this is, and so when he did, I posted it on all of our social media. And so hoping that, and there was a couple of people, one that she saw it on my page and she came and brought her son and realized, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And her son loved it. I think providing those opportunities where we cross promote, right. Where we say, hey, listen, this is a great event. Here's the other thing that I think is, and maybe it's not unique to other, maybe other communities experience this, but I think for us, two things are in play. One thing that is in play is we are very busy. We are working, we are just living life. And sometimes even that's a struggle. I feel like many of us deal with secondary trauma and are just basically functioning after having dealt with things, and just because that you have to keep it moving. And so I do think there is an effort in our community to really address mental health, and it is active, it is strong. There are people here in Grand Rapids, there are people in our community who are really being very intentional about that. So that is important. So you have that. Then the other part of our community, and again, I don't know if this is just our community or other communities experience this. I feel like it's just our community, but maybe others do, where we have to sort of test the waters. Like, we are very skeptical of, what is this really about? What are you doing? And I feel like we experienced a bit of that at our last collaborative event. But we are as a community, we're very skeptical about, okay, what's really going on here? What's behind this? What's the motivation? What's the motive? What are you trying to do? And we really have to test the waters. You have to be tested in our community. And that goes for anybody. That goes for politicians. That really just goes for anybody in our community. Businesses, you have to be tested. And right or wrong, that's how we are. And so once that happens and we gain that traction, or gain that, if you want to say, stamp of approval, then folks are more inclined to come out and support. And so it is sort of a conundrum, if you want to say, that it's like, I got good content here.
Yes.
You don't understand. This is really great content. Just like this author, this was exceptional content. And she actually went through her process. She went through how she even became a writer. She talked about when she was younger and how she went back and looked at some of her old papers at her dad's house, and she noticed that in her papers she had underlined descriptive words at like 10 years old, and she was like, who at 10 is even doing that? But she just really felt like there was this, God-given whatever within her, that she was supposed to be a writer. And she talked about even her first book. I don't want to, but this was a really great story. She had a deadline, and it was like the deadline. It was the day. And she, had her little ones, and she was like, I'm not going to do it. It's just not going to happen. And she called her husband, and he sort of talked her. Yes, you can. Why don't you do? Because her computer was glitching, and she's like, I just can't. She did let's say it was due at 5. She did like 4:58.
Oh my goodness.
She got it in, and that was her short story. And that was what launched her, because she was discovered. She won that contest. And from that, it just snowballed after that. And so it's like this lesson in being inspired and don't give up. And it was just really incredible. And so I know, Edye, that you have productions that are also, I've seen them, I've, witnessed them, that are also incredible, powerful content. And so it is just a matter of people recognizing and understanding in the community. Listen, I'm telling you, this is this is powerful. You want to see this. You want to be a part of this. And so it's just reaching out and getting, gathering people in order to have them to be exposed to what the great content.
And all it is really in any art form, it is about exposure. It is not like we go out and say, hey, everyone needs to be an artist of some kind.
Exactly.
The school systems don't do that. It's like, you've got to learn this to go get a job.
Yeah.
But with what we do, it's a whole brain thing, and an emotional thing. And sometimes people may think it's just, I think in our community, it's a protective thing. Like, they don't know what they're getting into. Like you're saying, they don't understand the power. And I'm going to be real honest. When I first started singing, it was kind of a natural thing for me because I was in choir and I was in band, and that's just what I wanted to do. Watching Diana Ross and stuff was my thing, but when I started to do theater, that was something I didn't see that many people doing. And I thought it was pretty much not something I'm supposed to do. And I don't know why I felt that way, but then I remember getting to my first theater production, and it was almost an all-Black cast. It was at Robeson Players, and I thought, what is this?
Right.
And so it is, what you're saying, it's just getting people one by one to understand, it's not a scary place.
Right.
It's not, we're not, you may have a little trauma from it. I don't know, depending on what the production is, but we have that opportunity to talk it through for any audience member that wants to come,
And you know what, Edye, I think too, it is no different if you are sitting at home and you are watching a movie and you are moved by that movie, but you're so drawn into it, you cannot turn it off.
Right.
You're like, oh my goodness, I'm so moved. I mean, I've had this experience where I am literally crying, but it's like, I cannot turn this off. I have to see what is the rest of the story. How does this person's story end? And I feel like, as relates to Ebony Road Players, that there are stories that you tell and they are impactful. Some stories are funny. They are hilarious. You really experience a range of emotions, but for those stories that really hit home, even though you are experiencing that emotion, I think there is something that within you that resonates, that says, that's my grandma's story.
Mm-hmm.
That's my story. That's my sister's story. That's my dad's story.
Right.
That's my brother's story. And so it resonates with you. And you just can't look away.
Right.
You're drawn in because you can't look away. So, that's what I experience when I see a play, by Ebony Road, I'll say.
Well, and what we do is we choose these. I feel so happy that we're able to do shows that we're not concentrating on butts in the seats all the time. We really are concentrating on the particular story. And some stories have come to me that have all been so deep. And I think one of the shows, and I think you saw this, was the one about Martha Washington. Yeah, that one was deep. It was funny. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was everything. And I remember us. I think he might have been in middle school, and he was he was hired to kind of do film for it because he was taking a film class. Oh. And at the very end, he came up to me and he said, "Wow, this, she just did not understand it. She just wasn't getting it." And he got really wrapped up in Martha Washington and what she just wasn't getting. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Because that's
which is what happens with art.
Yes.
People see art and they have their own experience with it.
Yes.
And that is what you want to happen. You want people. And again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. You want young people. You want all people, but you want young people to have that experience.
Yes.
Because that's a medium that you can take in that isn't necessarily, a class in school. Maybe it should be a class in school. It's not a class in school, but you are able to take in information, and then you are able to react from that and process it in your own way and own time. And I can be sitting next to someone else who takes it in and processes it a different way, right? But we're all having this experience as we view this, taking it in and processing it and learning from it and growing from it and developing opinions about it. It's just great. I love it.
It's great. And it's right there. As much as the movie is the same way, it is live in front of you with people having reactions. And that's why I love it. I got bit by the bug after one show and thought I have to do this. And so I've been very happy and blessed that I've been able to do so many wonderful shows. But yeah, it's important. I am going to not keep you for very long, but do you have anything else you would like to share? Because I really appreciate you coming on and really some great nuggets you've dropped on us today.
Well, I want to tell you just a little bit of what GRAAMA is doing. We have an event coming up this Saturday. You can go to Eventbrite and just type in Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives, and you will find a showing that we are having of Wakanda Forever. That is this Saturday. So go to Eventbrite, or you can call the museum to get your tickets. So that's something that we have going. Following that, we have a partner, one of our board members, who is an avid, now check this, he's an avid Black comic book collector.
What?
Yes.
That's awesome.
We are going to have a class on December 3rd, highlighting Black comics, Black comic books. And he's a collector from a kid.
Oh my gosh.
He collected when he was a kid and has a massive and extensive collection. And so we'll be highlighting that on December 3rd. We'll be talking about that on Saturday. But you can go to our website to find out more. The other thing that we're very excited about, we are collaborating with the museum school. And we are working with them to help develop projects that may potentially be traveling exhibits that will travel through schools. And we will have those students be guides as far as explaining and showcasing their exhibits. So we have that coming up. And we're also collaborating with some local college students who are history majors, who want to know about archiving and collecting and researching history. So we have a lot going on. So I would just say
that's awesome. And you know what? What I will do is I'll try to post this on my Facebook page, that we talked today. I don't, like I said, I don't know when this is going to come out, but I will post on my Facebook page what you guys are doing over there. We are doing something with the museum as well in June for our Loving Day celebration, actually, and it's about a book, a real book that was banned in the 1950s in Alabama. And I'm excited about that. It's a little piece of history that nobody knows about that we need to know about, because what are we doing now? We're banning books. Right. So I'm really excited about that. Deborah, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. And like I said, dropping some really amazing nuggets. I look forward to getting with you, and hopefully we can all do something, a little collaborative thing together in the near future. All right. Absolutely. And tell George we said hello.
I will absolutely do that. You take care, Edye.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
See you later.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Ebony Road Players Podcast. Creating theater with a purpose is our mission, and that is not possible without people like you. We appreciate you joining us for this podcast and for being a part of our diverse community. To view the video version of this episode and gain access to exclusive Ebony Road Players content and perks, join our community on Patreon at patreon.com/Ebony Road Players. In the words of Zora Neale Hurston, quote, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you," unquote. If you have a story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Contact us on Facebook, Instagram, or our website, ebonyroad.org. And we look forward to continuing the conversation next time on the Ebony Road Players Podcast.